This is the Personal Branding Success in 10 Minutes podcast. I am your host, Kaitlin Zhang.
And I am your host, Dannielle Bardowell. So what tips do you have on how I can use the media to work in my favor? Like, given the negative connotations behind getting involved with the media?
Yeah, certainly there are potential negative ramifications with the raw media, certainly, and especially with fake news nowadays. But there's also humongous amount of gain that you can get with working with the right, credible media partner. Mm-hmm. The first thing I have to say is this is not a step of personal branding that anyone should consider until they've built up a certain base level of credibility on their own brand first. So if you're just starting out, don't go just start looking for media opportunities everywhere, because that's not where your energy should be focused on. It should really be more focused on building the brand, making sure you get your basic assets like websites, LinkedIn, if that's your social media channel, like getting all those things figured out first, understanding your core audience and what value you add to them, brand positioning. So getting all that fixed. And then once you get a certain credibility, for example, you've done some work with prominent clients, or you have potentially some case studies and good stories to tell, then at this point, you can think about engaging with the media. Don't do that before. I've seen clients trying to do that before, and it's energy wasted. And why do I think you should get involved with the media at some point is because people do trust resources from third party. If someone else is saying how great you are, it's a little bit more trustworthy than you saying how great yourself is, especially if it comes from a reputable source.
That's true.
As an example, let's think about like Oval's target audience. We work in branding and marketing for tech, financial services, type of services. So
venture capitalists, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, venture capital, private equity, crypto, blockchain, so which media outlets do you think that our target audience might visit or might get their information from?
Off the top of my head, I would definitely say Forbes.
Forbes, mm-hmm.
Because Forbes' resources are always like centered around that kind of stuff. I'd also say Financial Times and then Bloomberg as well, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, certainly the tier 1 financial services, finance-related journals are the ones that our target audience might read. Which one of these do you feel like most connected with and that's credible and that you read, actually?
Okay, well, because you said most connected with, I would definitely say Forbes. I visit Forbes the most, but the reason I would actually choose Forbes as an answer to your question is because I've seen other reputable sources reference them sometimes. So it goes back to what you were saying just now about if other people are talking about you, then it builds trust. And I trust Forbes because I've seen other people, news outlets, even in my own country, mention that, Forbes said this. And also their articles, some of them take different standpoints. I always appreciate when people can write from other people's perspective. I'm not very good at arguing with people. I'm always trying to bring the conversation to a common ground, even if I disagree with someone. So I always appreciate when...
That's a very rare thing nowadays.
Yeah, I always appreciate when people can take different standpoints. So that's why I choose Forbes.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Like, for example, if you saw somebody you wanted to work with being featured in one of these top prominent publications that you trust, like you might be more likely to want to work with them, right? When I started working out, I was doing like smaller, more like niche media. For example, I was doing radio shows on business and like China business. And then we're getting invited on bigger and bigger things like CNBC. My most recent talk was with Financial Times. So it's growing from like small local media to finally like reaching to get the credibility of working with like Financial Times. To me, that's a huge step up.
Yeah.
And that's given me a lot of credibility in the work that I do. So when I say I'm running a personal branding podcast, but I've been having clients like the UK Cabinet Office, as well as being featured in Financial Times,
it
really gives me a lot of credibility. So that's why I think media is really good to be carefully consider them, but to work with them. My experience is like you have to find the right story and the right angle to tell. So sometimes people will send out a press release and it doesn't quite have a story. It doesn't have anything new and exciting or a hot topic. So journalists will just pass it by. So it's very important to work with a reputable PR agency. At Oval Branding, we also offer PR services. So the clients we work with, we make sure that we understand what their key messaging is, and we help them find the right angle to approach the journalists. Then we want to build a long-term relationship with the journalist because they may not have a story they want to write about you right away, but maybe 6 months down the line, they might have a story that can feature you, and you want to keep that relationship going.
I'm always curious. So, like, let's say you have a reputable media source featured on your website to say we've done partnerships with them, but then that source runs into a bit of a snag. Maybe there was a scandal involving them. Would it be best to maybe like remove them from your website for the time being, or just like not mention them, whether the scandal is their fault or not their fault?
Yeah, you have to assess the damage to reputation on your brand by including them. And if there is a damage, you want to think about, is this like being criticized? Is this publication being criticized for a little bit and it's unfair? Then maybe you want to support them by having their logo still up on your website and still saying you're affiliated with them. You want to take a stance. But if they are perhaps made a mistake and you don't think that you believe in the values this publication has anymore, then it's best to remove them, even though sometimes it's hard to give up something like that. It's always important to think about, how does this project your brand? Does it project it in a positive light or not?
How does it affect your image?
Yeah. Like, for example, if you're somebody who is in the US and you're really left-wing, but you are being quoted on a right-wing newspaper or something that's even extremist newspaper, you want to think very carefully about whether or not to include something like that on your brand. I'm not saying you should or not.
Absolutely.
Maybe you want to include it to say, I listen to the right as well. I listen to the other side and also speak to journalists on the other side. So it makes my brand look a little bit more thought out.
Neutral.
Maybe not neutral, but at least we're listening, right? And communicating well.
Yeah.
Or you want to take off some really, you don't really want to be quoted in a magazine or newspaper that you absolutely do not agree with. Like, if it's tabloids or something, maybe you just like, please keep me off of it. So it depends on the situation, but always think about, in the end, how does it affect your brand?
Okay. But the media, it's known to be ruthless and sometimes unkind, different aspects of the media, different people in the media. Like, why should a person looking to brand themselves online look to do anything with the media?
If you are a brand that's already out there, whether or not you engage with the media doesn't mean that they won't be writing about you anyway. So I think it's better to start small when you're earlier in your career, to start building more positive relationships with the media, so you have the better chance of being portrayed in a positive light.
Yeah.
If you've never spoke to a particular journalist before and they're writing an article about you because you're a prominent figure, at that point, sometimes it's very difficult to change their viewpoint. And there's a whole section of PR, which is to deal with negative PR, which is to deal with negative publicity. And like, it's also partly related to crisis management. Like, big corporations, if they have a big crisis, they need like PR teams to come in to handle it. So there's certainly services that you can get to help mitigate the risk of engaging with the media. But overall, I think for most brands, it's completely well worth the investment to build positive relationships. And also be prepared for a bit of a big investment, because PR is not...
It's not cheap.
Yeah, it's not cheap. So that's why I say also build your brand to a certain level before you think about this bit. So the main takeaways for today are, number 1, start with smaller trade publications and build your way up. Number 2, only engage with the media when you have something valuable to say. Don't just engage in the media because you think you want to get coverage. Actually have a good story. Number 3, you want to build long-term relationships with journalists and nourish that relationship. And the actionable next step is to identify 3 reporters, journalists in your industry that you can follow and support your work. note that I'm not saying you should start messaging them and DMing them on social media. Don't do that. Just support their work by liking it, commenting on it. Do that for a couple months to build a relationship with them first, and then you can perhaps approach them. Like do that groundwork. And from that, those 3 journalists, now you can start your kind of more targeted media list for later on. Give a little bit of something to them first before you ask them to do something for you. I think that's always good advice. Thanks so much. This episode is produced by Oval Branding, a London-based award-winning branding agency that serves corporate clients and personal clients around the world. Visit ovalbranding.com to contact us about your next marketing project. I am Kaitlin Zhang. Thank you for listening.